story that would be dropped would be an environmental story. That when we bought a speech and the environmental story with the editors and is interested, and apparently we don't even know him to say now, society, like forget about it. And I feel that the editors, I didn't know that myself because I thought that really gave priority to the stories and sometimes and the environmental stories are not necessarily you can do, I give an example of floods and drought stories which are also environmental and they featured widely in our news content. But editors, please be aware that that's what reporters think, that we do not value environmental stories and that if we do, we will do away with them altogether. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So from yesterday, so almost everything we do has an impact on climate change, or the things in my research. So I think the question we're looking for is as climate tourist give too much. That is the advertising in the climate story. The engagement in the term compared to the political analysis. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Charles Omen is my name. I'm Choshi. I'm a woman of Tensia. What stood out for me is methane is a major contributor about 90% to the gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for contributing and its contribution. If you just come, what you're doing, we are introducing ourselves again, just your name, your institution, and what stood up for you from yesterday's session.
Good morning. Again, my name is Kevin Duma, for the German Technology Corporation, otherwise known as GSM in Kenya. I think yesterday was more of a learning. We were taking class for a while, and we were told that greenhouse gases is not gases that come from the normal agricultural greenhouse. I think that was surveyed. And the group discussions, I believe, really were a big session so we could reflect on indeed what some of the areas that would actually require improvements or progress on lines. And today I'm really looking forward to listening to what came out of these discussions. Hoping they're going to be done. So otherwise, thank you so much and looking forward to doing this.
Thank you, Ken.
Good morning, everyone. My good name is Waneshi from Capital. For me, what I took away home is the importance of telling climate action stories from a point of understanding. Having the information and before you share that information to your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Understanding before you communicate, and I like the way you always remind us that you have a good name, even yesterday.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Shikana from the Nation Media Group. Yesterday was such a good day, and I learned quite a lot. But what stood out for me was the malaria fever analogy that Prof used to explain how a decrease, like 0.5 degrees Celsius or even just 1 degree Celsius can make a difference. The same way it does for a human person, it's the same way it can to our planet. So that is something that stood out. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaria. And the issue of temperatures.
Good morning. My name is Pauline Ongaji. What stood out for me yesterday was the scientific session, whereby we were being taught by the scientist himself and getting to know the science behind climate change.
Thank you for leaving the science behind. But Pauline, you didn't mention where your institution.
LMG.
Thank you.
Good morning. God is good all the time. Nicholas will come in. I'll think of yesterday, like there is a lot of information on climate change. What is required of us as journalists, how to package the same to reach the consumers.
Thank you. How to package a lot of information to something that can be understood by consumers. We'll proceed.
Good morning. My name is Gilbert Coet. I work for as environment and science writer. What I learned yesterday is that capacity building is the key.
Thank you. The need for capacity building.
Good morning. My name is James Gonzalo from the Standard Newspaper. What I learned yesterday is from Charles from Arctic that we should focus more on adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you. The need for adaptation as a continent. Proceed.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Samuel Doe Uma. I'm a health research and journalist. I work for a magazine called Health Business. And what I learned yesterday from the good crop was that for the climate change data collected over like 30 years and analyzed can tell us that there is a real change that is happening to our climate. Thank you.
Thank you. The use of data to know if there's climate change.
Good morning. George Kemoso from Kodei. I write health and science. There was a lot of information we learned yesterday from humanizing climate change stories to making them simple. But then what stood out for me is what Dr. said that you will continue to maintain the status quo. Climate change. These scenarios are going to get worse. So media, we should know how to bring out these stories for policymakers to be able to know the difference.
Thank you, George. They need to challenge the status quo.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm still Samuel Lawina, and I still write for Daily Nation. Two things stood out for me from Daktari. One is the issue of the accountability as media as well as journalists. How do we take the people in power or the supreme authority on our roads? The things they meet the death, they're supposed to be checked. Who checks? Even mental health is in this thing. It's a big area that we need to actually explore as journalists. Thank you.
Thank you. Accountability and the issue of climate change and how it is connected to mental health.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tiriani Mwazaya from Radio Baraza. What I learned yesterday is the words mitigation, the way I
as a journalist, do you have the skills to tell these climate stories? And are you knowledgeable in that field? Then what content to back your stories? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Ivy Maraka. I'm a communications officer at the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. The head of programs was here yesterday presenting the organization, and so I wasn't here, but thanks to Digital, and I didn't know she's the one who works at KBC Digital. Something that caught my eye as I was scrolling and evaluating is from something that Madam Rosalia Omingo said, which is excellent reporting must go beyond reporting about who said what, and move to the basic tenets of science that has been proven. Reporters must learn to interrogate journal articles, reports, and government documents, which will add value to their story through provision of data and policy. They must look beyond single sourcing to help viewers understand the story. And so for me, just like Krishi mentioned, we need to move from the fact that climate change is not an environmental issue. It cuts across, and there are various things that need to come out, and everyone in this room has what do you call it? Everyone has a responsibility as a journalist to ensure that people, everyone in the country, policymakers, the basic mwananchi, the people suffering from the climate change issues, have the necessary information to ensure that they build their resilience, they are able to build their capacities, and that we are not disconnected with what is happening all over the world. And so I look forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you. We all have our responsibility, and we should not be disconnected. Just your name and your institution and what stood out for you yesterday, or if you were not there yesterday, just anything you like to tell us about climate change.
Good morning. My name is Dan. I'm here from A24. I was here yesterday. What I got from Dr. Ogonyo was journalists can have areas of specialization. But of course, I don't know, last year most of us are into environment and climate change. But this was a general presentation. But it made me see other areas people are journalists and venture into reporting, especially when you spoke about the religious, the grouping, the Muslims, the Christians, someone reporting an understanding of some of these institutions. And of course, Akja mentioned something which we do, most of us, putting the face to a story that we're doing. For me, it was just a reminder of something we do at the time.
Thank you very much. They need to put a face when we are telling climate change stories. The second last table.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am a journalist from Tuko News. I learned so many things yesterday, but I think the best part for me was how I was getting story ideas as the presentations were being made, especially on the intersection of climate change and health, how it's accelerating the malaria and cancer. That is something I hope to work on as a result of the ideas that I got yesterday. And so I'm looking forward for more inspiration today. Thank you.
Thank you. How climate change is accelerating some diseases.
Jambo. There's a reason I have stood, and this is because I am the senior most radio producer in this room. Now, this talk about climate change has taken me back almost 20 years ago. When as a young producer, I used to cover UN meetings. Meeting was like the ozone layer, greenhouse gases. And many years today, we are still talking the same thing. So I stand here as one of those people who has covered climate change for a long period of time. My take home is what Professor Levy said yesterday, and it came up during our discussion in the groups, that when we were talking about the issue of people who are not trained now, taking over and therefore the need to define who a journalist is. But we remembered, we were reminded that Professor Levy yesterday gave us the definition of UNESCO of a journalist. And what did he say? That anybody with a microphone has a right to speak, isn't it? So, what does that mean us? So we need to rise above and ensure that we do stories according to ethics. He also talked about that. Just to throw in a light note, Osman, my colleague, I am shocked that you are not shocked that your cows contribute to very global warming, yeah? So that's just on a light note. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The need for ethics in reporting climate change.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Renata Joyner. I know of Kate and I write down climate change and how I understand. I learned a lot of things yesterday. Everything was the same. But what stood out was the use of data explained by Luke to support our stories so that we can relate in putting our face to each and every climate change story that we publish. And one other thing that came out when we were in our group, the digital group, as we were trying sources we contacted in our efforts to do climate change stories, and it was clear that there was no sector that was left out, from construction, banking, health, water. It therefore means that climate change affects each and every aspect of our lives, each and every aspect of our communities, and for that reason, we as journalists have a role to play in ensuring that everyone else also plays their part in climate action. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
All sectors are affected.
Good morning. Yesterday, my understanding on this subject was broadened, and I really appreciated all the presentations. And what stood out for me is just what the former speakers spoken about, and that is the multidisciplinary nature of climate change, such that as journalists, we will not restrict ourselves only to environment issues, but we'll be able to have an eye that is able to detect climate change in all aspects, maybe perhaps even in issue of infrastructure. How does climate change then come in, and then focus on solutions and interventions. And I also managed to understand that Kenya and Africa as a whole should now focus on adaptation, and such that my stories will also be focusing on looking at areas of adaptation when I public them as a news entrepreneur who has just ventured into covering climate and health. Thank you.
Thank you. Issues of solutions. Before I go to the last table, anyone here who is still, anyone who has this come late, hasn't introduced him or herself?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Lea Missouri. I write with Talk Africa. And what stood out for me today is that climate change is fostering some diseases like cancers. So we need to report accurately and also tell the stories from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Need for accuracy when we are reporting on climate change.
Good morning. My name is Kezia Benji from Amik. Some of the things, I came a little bit late, but I came when the doctor was talking about the issues about climate and climate change and mental health. And also something I picked from him, he also mentioned was how the other continents are great contributors to the climate change, but Africa is being affected the most. So we need to also kind of be reporting on issues of climate change aggressively.
Thank you. How Africa is being affected and the need for aggressiveness when it comes to reporting or telling our own stories.
Hi everyone, my name is Lois. I'm an editor at the International Organization of Women Radio and TV. What stood out for me yesterday is that if we don't magnify the impact of climate change, then it will go worse in the future.
Thank you. We come here.
Morning.
Good morning.
Apologies for this arrival. First of all, I think I got more insights yesterday, especially on the major gases. And I didn't know livestock actually is a big contributor, given that this continent is a place where livestock, is a livelihood for many people. So I think from there on, we have to report on ways to mitigate, as the director said. And also I think today I was very much interested in the carbon credits and the financial aspect of climate change. Because I think we've moved from talking to action, and action is money. So I think today also I'll get more.
Thank you. The contribution of our livestock as far as climate change is concerned.
Good morning.
Good morning.
CEO of Kenya Heritage Guild. And so it was a good reminder, first of all, of the history of the processes of negotiations, and from the Kyoto Protocol to the Paris Agreement, and to the mechanisms or the interventions that were put in place there, the clean development mechanism. So that was a good reminder, and I believe will make for good discussions or good training sessions in the curriculum that we are hoping to develop, or we are trying to develop. It was also a good reminder that Kenya is the first African country to enact legislation on climate change. So that's good follow-up also from the reporters here to find out on what's the progress for the other African countries to put in place legislation for climate change. But also thirdly, just like his thing, Samuel Olito said, that was a very good perspective about mental health and climate change. So it's almost like new, but it was a very good perspective about what are the other ways in which climate change is manifesting.
Thank you for development of curriculum, comprehensive one.
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Rebecca Meroni. I'm a producer working for the study group, 18 years. And yesterday, I think it's like the same sentiments as Rosanna on the international treaties and how they affect how we report the stories. Yeah, so I think it's important that for me, understanding that, how these legally binding treaties affects what we have right now was very key. And of course, just understanding like how many countries adopted to the agreements, for example, the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, and the NDCs. So it's a very good session.
Thank you. How we have been affected by treaties. Lastly, there's a gentleman here, just your name, your institution, and what you learned from yesterday, then we proceed to the next session.
Good morning. Hamjambo.
Jambo, good morning.
Naitwa Diana Sena kutoka kituo cha habari cha Coach FM cha is a community radio station based in Korogocho. Kile kitu ambacho naweza nikasema nilijifunza jana ni kusema kweli, hizo issue na climate mara nyingi sisi hatujakuwa tukifanya kwa sababu ya vile vizingiti ambavyo vimekuwepo, na vile pia kuogopa kwa sababu ya wale ambao tumekuwa tukiwalichi waje labda the government ambao wanahitaji labda kuongelea, mara nyingi huwa wanakataa kwa sababu wanatuambia kwamba kwa ugonjwa security yangu itakuwa na magani. Basi tumekuwa tukitafuta mbinu mbadala ambayo ni ya kurekodi ama phone calls ambazo huwa tumekuwa tukizitumia kuwa reach. Na from yesterday kuna vitu ambavyo nilijifunza kwamba kuna zile vitu area of specializations kama mara nyingi tumekuwa tukizifanya kwa ujumla, kwamba tunajumlisha tu kama mtu ambaye wale ambao ni sources tunawaangalia wale ambao wala wanazungumzia sisi hatutaki kujua kwamba atazungumzia na njia gani, but kuna zile area of specializations ambazo nilijifunza jana kwamba lazima tuwe tuna reach out kwa yule mtu ambaye atazungumzia kinagaubaga kuhusiana na kile kitu ambacho tunahitaji kukijua, na vile kitu ambacho jamii yetu ya Korogocho pia inahitaji kukijua. Asante.
Thank you. Years of specialization. Lastly, there's a gentleman there.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Steve Ochieno. I work at Nation yesterday.
Mabadiliko ya hali ya hewa, it is changes in the weather, and the weather is temporary. Climate change is the 30-year plus. Yes. Nilijifunza hivi kwamba the media can actually take a sabbatical in reporting about politics and survive by reporting on issues that actually affect people's livelihoods. And that is something that I have seen in media elsewhere, whereby you will get on the front page of newspaper or leading stories having a proportion of politics, yes, but then there is a proportion on some specific issues that affect livelihoods, and actually it is something that the media can be able to do in this country, and then we try to change. I've seen that happen elsewhere. Otherwise, we had a chance to do a lot of discussion in the 4 main groups, where my colleague Ken helped us to group ourselves together: the digital, the radio, the TV, and print media. What I would like us to do now is the rapporteur who was there, the chair, if you can just be able to give us an update of what emerged from the 3 key questions. Based on that, we will now afterwards be able to go back into our very groups to be able to discuss something else as a follow-up to that. And what we will discuss very groups are what in terms of interventions that you may need, and that will help in coming up with the table of components of the curriculum that I'll be able to design for the training going to the future. That is for the different categories of the media, and then also applying the different sectors we talked about altogether. So with that, may I request the first group that's ready to be able to tell us what we discussed, and then we'll document that, and then from there move to the next step. Which group is ready? Yes, walio tayari? Print? Print, you around? Yes. Okay. You can give us an update if you are ready, or if not, then digital or TV or radio. That will help us to get started. Naona Bwana Ken atatusaidia hapo kuweza wachangamsha watu ili waweze kuja kwa ajili ya asante. Helen, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Helen Shikana from the Nation Media Group. I was part of the print group, and we discussed different things. And from our discussion, we noticed that the gaps and the challenges are almost interlinked. But I'll just go through some of the things that we mentioned. I'll go through some of the things that we talked about yesterday. And from the gaps, one of the things, most of the print reporters and also digital, we don't know how to use open source investigations and AI when reporting about climate change. And we were giving an example of how maybe you want to see how Nairobi River has been over the past years, and you just want to use something like Google Earth to show the difference of maybe how it was in 1990 and how it is now. So most reporters don't have knowledge on using open source investigation. And then we all agreed that there was a training gap, and we are grateful for this training, which has enlightened us on most issues of climate change, especially the science behind climate change. And then the other gap, which is also a challenge, is lack of interest from assigned editors who believe that some of the climate stories are PR-ish. So when they see us going to tell stories maybe from a particular NGO, they think we are just promoting what that NGO is doing. It we are telling the climate story as it is based on the reports that have come out. And then sources with zero knowledge on policies, and this came out from someone who reports on Parliament, and he was just worried that most of our parliamentarians don't know anything about climate change, yet they're the ones discussing the bills that are passed in Parliament. So when we don't have that most of our data that we get is mostly from UNEP or the World Bank. We don't have Kenya-specific data that we can quote to like on our stories, and if there is, it's outdated. Like we can have data from 2011, yet we are in 2024, we need to tell that story. And then some reporters also face hostility when they're reporting, especially when it's a press conference and they've come to, like, let's say the Ministry of Environment has called for a press conference and the PS just reads the press release and then there's no room for clarifications to ask questions. And if you try to probe, you are faced with hostility. And then there was also a gap in terms of simplification of terms, which also boils down to training, because when people don't understand what they're writing about, they may find it difficult to explain something like what carbon credits is or any other thing in climate. In-depth reporting on climate issues, just like what Prof was talking about this morning, the difference between climate change and weather. Sometimes we may have, maybe it's too hot or it's raining and then people start saying that it's climate change and it would just be a change of weather. So when you don't have that background and in-depth reporting, you may end up angling your stories poorly. And then the other gap is on getting stories from research papers or journals. Most people don't even know that there are journals that exist that have climate issues. So you end up just telling stories from either press conferences or events like the Africa Climate Summit, and that's it. Question 2, which I have partly touched on, which was on the challenges. I have mentioned some of the things which are policymakers being ignorant, government bureaucracy, and then something else that we felt was a challenge was that we thought scientists feel that journalists are daft, especially when we ask questions. Because when we want to break it down to people, we need to ask questions in the simplest way. So when we ask such questions, scientists feel that we are not intelligent, we are daft. And then there is also that mistrust between journalists and scientists, because when you don't get that clarity when you are interviewing a scientist, you will end up misquoting. So when the scientist sees that in the paper or in the bulletin, they'll not trust you again to give your comments the next time. And then the other challenge is translating science to other languages that my colleague there was talking about. Just even apart from Kiswahili, now the local languages, there's a challenge in translating the terminologies on climate change. And then when you get, maybe you get a field trip from an organization, they want you to tell stories based on what they're doing and not based on the journalistic interest. So you end up telling biased kind of stories because you've been funded to do those stories. And that boils down to lack of funding the newsroom for climate stories. And then the third question, how well is the media enabled to cover climate change? We generally felt that we are not well enabled because we don't have that expertise in the newsroom. And we were talking about most newsrooms do not even have a owners will not put money there. And then there's also gatekeeping by editors on some stories. When, let's say NEMA, there's a story that NEMA released where some companies were polluting Nairobi River. So when you mention some of those companies, and there's an editor who has an interest in one of those companies, there's a lot of gatekeeping, so that story will end up dying. And then mostly we do desktop stories, and forget the human side of the climate issues, and that was a challenge that we thought needed to be highlighted so that we can be able to cover stories. And then the second part of that third question was the solutions we thought would help. Partnerships with government and development partners, and trainings such as this will help in a great way. And then if governments or sources can reduce bureaucracy so that we can tell the stories as it is by having access to those experts. And then data, just learning how to use data on climate and its availability would help in telling our stories. Setting up of departments or desks of climate change. And then as journalists, we also just need to equip ourselves because there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of sources that we need to, like BBC has a training or BBC Action on climate change. Oxford has a training on the Oxford Climate Journalism Network. So we can't say that there is no training yet. There are available online and free sources. So it's also upon us to just find where we can get places to learn climate change reporting. And then we also suggested that the ministry should have a pool of experts, apart from just the PS and the CS, that we can reach out to, maybe from their website or through their comms so that we can have access to those experts when they're telling stories. That's all. Unless I've forgotten anything, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was quite comprehensive, very informative. Yes, the next team after print, whoever is ready. Good.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Mujuri from the Standard Group, producer. I'm here to represent TV. Some of my team members are here. Very good. So we'll do this together, just in case I forget something. So some of the gaps in climate change is the first one is the knowledge gap. I think just like the print side, we realize that there's a knowledge gap. There's a evolving climate lingo, you know, like for example, we never used to talk about carbon credits some years back. Right now we're talking about carbon credits. So we need to, there's that, like there's a knowledge gap in most newsrooms. And then there's breaking down jargons. Right now we've just spoken about Tabianchi. I think there's a debate about Tabianchi and whether to use Tabianchi over hali ya anga, like she said. So if we're able to break down the jargons, we'll be able to do better. So that's a gap that is there. And of course, being able to translate this to Swahili, yeah, and then other local languages. There's also the editorial decisions, like I think they mentioned. There's lack of interest by editors, and we are glad that you're organizing this, like GSL has organized this, the ministry, to just get editors on board, to be able to also understand climate change. So there's need for capacity building, that's a gap, and this is a good step towards that. And then there's lack of Swahili experts. When you want to invite, say, experts to speak in Swahili, experts to studio, you have a conversation, in Swahili, and it's a problem. Like, expressing themselves, some of the scientists expressing themselves in Swahili becomes a problem. So there's also another gap that climate change conversations are too elitist. And most of the experts that we invite to studio or that we engage in our stories, like having complex language, and there's a gap in knowing how to communicate to the common one, like how to explain to a person why, say, there's flooding in their area, how do you break that down? So that is a gap that we need to fill. So there's also another gap in lack of resources. That should come as number 2 sectors. Lack of resources. Like she said, sometimes you want to go and tell a story away from town, and right now you understand the situation in most of the newsrooms. It's a bit hard to send like a whole crew to go and tell a story. However, there are people who are using that, like partnerships, who are working with partnerships. There's some media houses that are working with NGOs to be able to do that. So they provide the editorial guidance and the airtime, but all you have to do is go and do the story. But again, a challenge presents itself because you're tempted to tell the story, you're tempted to tell that story in a way that will amplify the works that this NGO is doing in that place and not really highlight maybe the challenges that the people are facing there. So that is also a gap in terms of resources, lack of resources. And then of course there's need to have climate desks, so to speak. Yeah, so some media houses have that, some don't. But there's need to have continuous reporting. That is something that we've noticed that there's a gap. We only talk about climate change when the ACS is around the corner, or when we have COP, it's coming, so that's when every media house is talking about climate change. But after that, it's all quiet. So there's need to start mainstreaming climate change stories. And then there's climate reporting opportunities. Yes, so there's lack of that. I think I have mentioned that. And then capacity building, you see that. Okay, so I'll get to the second question. On the key sectors you engage with in your specialization, and what challenges faced in getting the sources. So my team felt like bureaucracy, of course, approaching the Ministry of Environment, and this NEMA, especially NEMA was mentioned very heavily. It's very hard to get NEMA officials to comment on anything, or to even get them to come for any TV interview, or they'll tell you that they're coming, but they end up not showing up. So we feel like we're not getting the support that we need from the government. But county governments have been very helpful. So the same county governments are very responsive. The CCMs, the county governors have come through. So that's, I think, a positive thing. And then there's that also, the government officials expressing climate change in Kiswahili. It's also a big challenge. And other languages, so that's a challenge that they need to get officials who can speak other than just the CS or the PS. And then the third question was on how well is Making Kenya enabled to cover climate change. Because of course, the budget cuts right now in most media houses, there is lack of resources, so we feel like we need that. We need to be able to cover climate change stories. And then no government assistance. Yeah, so some of us were complaining yesterday how they were locked out from ACS, covering ACS. So we need that. And then this also came out like there's need to have specific journalists who cover climate change, sort of like we need to have a pool of, you know, like journalists who cover climate change, and so that anytime you're out or you're calling the CS to come for your interview or to comment on your story, it's easy for them to know that so-and-so is a climate change reporter or is a science journalist, because that has also been cited as a problem. You know, they tend to go for the big names in the media houses as opposed to the people who really, like the journalists who understand climate change. I don't know whether that is whether people can be enabled. I don't know whether it's now enabling the other journalists or also just understanding that there are people who specifically work in that field. And then there's the information gap, like if there's lack of training, if that is one way that the Kenyan media can be enabled to be able to cover climate change, and of course opportunities. If you're able to get more opportunities to cover climate change, that would be it for now. Thank you.
Yes. Asante sana. Thank you for that. And now let's give a chance to the next. That's radio? Okay, karibu. I'm already seeing some of the gaps repeated, which shows the urgency, and that's very good altogether. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hilda Jama. I'm here to represent radio. You know, in radio, I'm not used to so many people like this. We are used to remaining in a cube somewhere and we start talking to people whom you are not seeing. So, yeah, some of the gaps that my fellow journalists have just highlighted from print, from TV, is the ones that for us radio we are also encountering and having. We realized that there's the gap in terms of lack of dedicated spaces on radio for climate change programs. Like in radio, some of the radio stations doesn't have like the spaces that they're dedicated on issues of climate, or even in their programs. You will realize in the morning when you tune into any radio station, utasikiza mambo ya labda tuseme magazeti, traffic updates, alafu ikifika mid morning pale utaanza kusikia mambo labda ya usafi, alafu you know there is no dedicated space kwa radio kwamba sasa hapa tutakuwa tunazungumzia masuala ya tabia nchi. Another gap is lack of knowledge on climate change. Just like my fellow journalists have mentioned, we have that lack of knowledge because we felt most of journalists they are not well trained. They doesn't have enough knowledge so to carry issues of climate change on radio. There is an issue of language barrier. We felt that there is a gap in terms of language because we have other radio stations that are broadcasting in local languages, and therefore it becomes ambiguous to translate some of the terms. Kama hiyo ya tabia nchi, nilikuwa naambiwa kwamba nikiambiwa niseme kwa lugha yangu ya mama itakuwa kidogo ngumu na watu labda watacheka, manake it sounds awkward. So the issue of language barrier came. Conflicting information from various sources, i.e. religion leaders, scientists. I really want to know who is this weatherman, because tukitangaza habari za tabia nchi siku zote tunasema weatherman. I really want to meet this weatherman. And religious leaders also have arrived with some of the conflicting information. Labda tutangaze kwamba kutakuwa na mvua tuseme mwezi huu wa Aprili, alafu ukose kunyesha. Sasa wale viongozi wa makanisa wataanza kutuuliza, kwani nyie Mungu mlijuaje kwamba kutanyesha? Angalia hakujanyesha. You know, when our president said there will be El Nino and ikahappen kwamba imefail kidogo, religious leaders were like, tulisema, nyinyi si Mungu, you know. So such like conflicting information, we felt like it's a gap when it comes to knowledge in radio. Resistance from managers, editors on climate change programs. For us, mostly for us who are working in private radio stations, the owners will always ask you, inaleta nini hiyo kitu unasema, you know? And if it's not bringing anything on the table, the media owners and the managers and the editors will brush it off. Watasema hiyo kitu kama ileti pesa, I don't think it is good to put it on radio. So that was also another gap we felt in our group. Lack of expert journalists to cover and report climate-related stories. That one I've also tackled. And we felt that there is need to have climate change segments in our various programs. Question 2, key sectors we interact with as radio journalists. My colleague said we interact with agriculture in regards to climate change. We interact with health because we've been told from yesterday and today that climate change goes hand in hand with health. So health becomes another sector that we interact with, and the issue of education also becomes the sector that we interact with. On challenges faced in creating credible sources, we said unwillingness of the experts to provide information on radio. This has become like something else, because you go to a certain office, you want to get certain information on climate change, and there is no expert that is willing to speak. So that one became a challenge for us. The issue of facilitation to go cover to have numerous sources. So when, for example, for us in radio, you invite an expert to come and talk about or engage our listeners on issues climate change, they will ask, are you facilitating? Unatoa kitu, you know? So lack of having maybe you are not given enough funds on it will be a challenge. There are some guests who will cancel the appointment on the last minute. So I am here, I'm hosting a certain program, and I had invited my guests to come and engage my target audience on issues of climate change. But just some minutes to the radio talk show now, the guest will call me and tell me, I'm sorry, I will not make it to your program. So you see, that one becomes also a problem. But we at least gave a solution and said, to avoid this, we can have numerous sources. Radio journalists can maybe invite numerous sources or have numerous sources, so that maybe when a certain a certain guest will fail, we'll have to call another expert, maybe on phone call, to have a phone call interview. That one will help to curb some of this challenge. Lack of facilitation for the journalists to access information on climate change also was another challenge. For example, for me, I work for Gate FM. It's a community radio station in Kruger Agenda. And maybe one day I decide I want to go in Lake Victoria or maybe some parts of the country to cover to have a story on issues of climate change. My editor will tell me, no, that one is very far, and I don't think I'll provide any facilitation for you. So, you know, going to Kisumu on my small stipend, you know, it becomes very, very hard and very difficult, and therefore becomes one of the challenges that the radio people encounter. Some media houses lack adequate budget to allocate reporters, on issues of climate change. Feedback from the audience on information needs. Some of the radio stations, let me talk about community radio stations. I don't know about the others because that is where I work. It doesn't have a budget to do the survey. The survey itself, I'm told, it's very expensive, and therefore it becomes hard for other radio stations to tell or to have the feedback from the listeners or from the audience. Now this is what we want, and we end up giving them maybe what they doesn't want to hear, because other radio stations doesn't have the budget for that. Lack of resources on survey of the feedback, yes, that is what I have talked about. On question 3, how well media in Kenya is enabled to cover climate change. We felt that maybe this question could be how well can the media be equipped to cover climate change, because we have complained, and therefore we said media houses and change stories. That one will really help. Influencers and comedians have taken over radio, resulting to limited time for journalists. Nowadays, many radio stations, if you tune in the morning and in the afternoon during the drive home show, you will realize so many comedians are in the studios, and therefore we have other journalists who are maybe well equipped with the skills on matters climate change, but they doesn't have the opportunity because now the citizen journalists have taken over. The comedians have taken over the radios, and this matter of climate change, I don't think they are. I'm not pretty sure if the comedians are well equipped with the skills on matters of climate change. That is all from radio. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are some things which are repetitive, and therefore I'm getting where there is basically the huge gap. Yes, now let's go digital. Take digital. Yes, please. Digital as they are, you can trust the digital because it's carrying a laptop. Can you say?
Speaking as the last person can be very challenging, especially when everything has been said. But let me give a voice to what has been discussed under the digital desk. A lot, of course, has been said. That means that I'll be very quick. First of all, we have a challenge. We identify the issue of insufficient training, which has largely been talked about. And we felt like there is a general calculated exclusion of digital reporters. General calculated exclusion. What do we mean by that? We are seeing scenarios where TV or radio, that is the traditional media, including also print, journalists from that particular space are more seen than journalists from the digital space. Why? Because if you look at major events like what we had here in Nairobi last year in September, SES, add-on to UNEA 6, it was very hard for you to get accredited as a digital journalist because somebody will ask you from which media house. So maybe people expect to say you are from BN, you are from The Star, you are from The Standard, or from Citizen TV, Citizen Radio, and all those other established media houses. So one thing that came up is that there is that lack of, there is that general exclusion of reporters drawn from digital side. Then I understand people from print have talked about a possibility of having so much data out there, but we cite this as one of the gaps. Insufficient data. What do we mean by that? We are looking at a scenario where there are some organizations that in as much as they have quality data, they are out to sell that particular data. So that becomes a problem, or sometimes you realize that there is disjointed data, or the credibility in it is not worth a pinch of salt. And also there is lack of updated data when it comes to issues of climate change, except for organizations like UNEP who have been around for quite some time. Then you also cite lack of specialization. Many media houses have not prioritized climate change and related stories. So despite the fact that we have a lot going on, like we saw what we were trained on yesterday in terms of construction, so many sub-themes under climate change, we still have a problem of insufficient data in as far as such issues are concerned. Then we also don't have this aspect of specialization, so we lack specialization. And it's very interesting to have learned yesterday that yes, it's possible to have specialization, especially on maybe climate financing, health, and just picking specific areas where one can delve into. Then the other gap or problem that we identified is financing independent coverage. We have a lapse on that. We don't have adequate finance to really champion the coverage of issues of climate change. So what are we suggesting? We are looking at a scenario where partners can come on board, like let's say GIZ can come on board and say, no, we want to finance this particular desk fully for it to be operational. But the problem that comes is that most of these partnerships are very short-lived, where maybe somebody comes on board for 6 months or 1 year, yet this particular desk has to be consistent, just the same way as we see with politics and other issues. Another challenge that we rather gap is the question of staffing challenges, and under this we say that rarely you will see a media house putting up an advert looking for a climate change reporter. They want an all-rounder. It's like when you see an organization looking for a communication personnel, we have seen this joke online that the organization is looking for 3 or 4 departments in one person. They want a video editor, they want a social media influencer, they want a writer, they want a grant writer, and many other things. So you realize that that does not give the niche to that particular person. So how are we going to address the issue of staffing? We are looking at a scenario where we can have maybe media camps. Let's say, I think Nation has one, Standard also has one, where young journalists, maybe from school, are taken into a training such that we are particularly interested in turning this new graduate right from college to inculcate the spirit or rather the art of storytelling using through climate change. So we can equally, we are also looking at a problem related to financing independent coverage, and we say that there is need to maybe equip some journalists, maybe to see to it that they are venturing into investigative reporting on climate issues. And partners can work with that together with staffing issues so that to make that a success. Another challenge we are having, or rather another gap, is that there is a problem with financing. Particularly, we are looking at a scenario where we should make climate change stories a revenue stream. If you go to our websites, be it Africa.nation, be it Citizen.digital, be it Standard.co.ke, you will realize that most of these stories are actually what I would say hidden under specific columns. So you realize that it's not so vocal on the websites that we are actually targeting. Why can't we then make that particular column as huge as possible, like you will see maybe local news or something close to that? So we can make climate change stories a revenue stream, that's what I'm saying, so that we attract advertisers to this particular column. Another issue that we are citing, it has to do with the question of insecurity. Our colleague here from, was it Time Red or something, he mentioned that there is that question of where when you call somebody for an interview within your studios, they are hesitant because they feel there is a problem in that particular area, and maybe they will run to a studio where they feel they are more safe. So we are saying that there is need to dismantle information cartels in areas that are polluted, for example, areas like Dandora, areas like Korogosho, Madara, and many other areas where it can be very risky for a journalist to go into those particular areas, especially when you are pursuing stories that are likely to brush some particular photos in a bad way. Then we went to question 2, what are the key sectors that we're working with? We have energy, transport, blue economy, health, building and construction, agriculture. We also have WASH, tourism and wildlife, NGOs, INGOs, CSOs, parliament, policymakers, judiciary, the media itself, the creative sector, government and state actors, diplomacies, private and legal. And then we have academia. I'll make a small point about diplomacies. We know that when, for example, you want to go to COP, it becomes necessary for you to kind of go through some form of a consulate or something close to that. And we all know the kind of shikers that you can go through when it comes to looking for sort of permission to get into that the other country. So what are the challenges associated with finding credible sources? Number one, we flag the issue of availability. Some of them are just not available. They will redirect you to some email which is very dormant, to me or Maswali, then that will be it. The question of corruption, somebody feels that because climate change, there is a lot of financing, so somebody feels that for me to give you this particular information, I feel you should give me something. And for those of you, or rather for those of us who have been able to rather been reporting from the field, sometimes you go to a group, maybe you want to talk about a certain issue about climate change, they already have a knowledge, or rather believe that since you are coming from Citizen TV or from whichever media organization, they think you have some money to give to them so that you are able to get this information. Especially those, they don't understand that media is not per se into buying content from them. Then the other challenge is many red tapes and bureaucracies. I know it's been talked about. Then the question of time. Some of them do not understand the concept of the concept of time element when it comes to processing news. Then we have a problem of masqueraders and quacks. I know the media has also had that particular challenge, and Good Enough Media Council is working on that. Then there is lack of database on climate change experts. I think people from print had also mentioned that. Then we have a problem of sources biasness and perception on new media. And one of of the very interesting conversations that came out of that particular point is when you go to an event, somebody will ask you, hii story ulichapisha wapi? Because they expected to see themselves in a hotel room on a screen or something. Then you are sending them a link to the story that you did. So they were like, oh, I thought it's going to TV or something, because for digital also you have the audiovisual element. So they thought as you were filming, they thought it will appear on some particular TV. So there's that perception when it comes to the new media. Then some sources have tendencies of controlling information, and many of the speakers, when we were having this discussion, thought that there are specific organizations, especially the INGO and NGOs, who feel that, look, because we are giving you this information, we are therefore going to shape the kind of story that comes out of it. In fact, some said that in some instances, someone wants your raw copy before it goes to the press. You can see the level of interruption or infiltration that comes with that. Then there are some specific NGOs that want to push a shaped opinion and agenda out of what you may need. There are cases where I've come to ILRI, for example, to just to seek opinion about a scientific matter like maybe methane and all that. But because you want to push a certain agenda, you prioritize that than just having what I needed from you. So you go ahead and shape that particular opinion, and now you change my story, and you insist that because you talked to us about this, this should be the case. That becomes a problem. Then number 3, how well is the media in Kenya enabled to cover climate change? 3 points here. Number 1, we are realizing that while right to access to information is enshrined in our constitution, the practicality bit of it is in doubt. Some data providers may want payment for them to release that particular information. So you are seeking information. I believe it's Article 35 or level, where you have the right to access information. But because of bureaucracies, facing harsh realities, especially when government agencies are sanctioned to stop advertising in specific media, especially online, over such standards. I've not seen much of advertising from the government or any other government agencies, particularly on online media, because of the reservations such government agencies still hold. Maybe most of them will go to print, and most of the time, because we have the MyGov, that's where all the government advertising has to go through. So we have a problem with that. And if you remember the issue of Moses Kuria versus Nation Media Group, so we have that. We have the freedom of the press, it's guaranteed, but then there is this public declaration that this particular media house should not have advertiser or rather government advertising through the channels. Then number 3, in the prevailing hardships or rather economic hardship, the media is not equipped to spearhead independent coverage of climate change stories. So, and also, we realize that these actually extend to as far as the remuneration of journalists. So, most of journalists who are online are also paid so well, maybe to do this work independently. So, from this it can be observed that the media houses in Kenya have challenges in fully creating, nurturing and even enhancing creation of climate change desks to spearhead such efforts. So if you ask me how well is the media in Kenya enabled to cover climate change, I would say not so much. It's not so much equipped to do all this work. And another problem that it's coming up strongly maybe this is off cuff, is the problem of monetization. Any media house that is thinking about getting into digital content production, the first question that comes on their mind is, how are we going to turn this content into money? And you know, because maybe for television they know a 30-second ad will cost this much, for a radio station they know a 30-second ad will cost this much. So another big challenge that comes with the digital media is the question of monetization, and that is been spoken so eloquently about. So up to that level, I would really like to thank you for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Based on what the four groups have presented, some of the ideas are cutting across that will help in guiding us, specifically I and team, in terms of the topics to be able to bring out very clearly in the training manual that we'll develop in the curriculum. However, we will be able to discuss that more after our tea break. And so I request that we take a 30-minute tea break. When we come back, we will get into a question and answer session, and then we transition into the group work again, and we'll be guided on how to be able to go ahead in doing the group assignment. So may I ask my colleague Ken to come and also give some reflection together, some guidance on some specific issues. Karibu Bwana Ken.
Thank you. Good morning once again. Good morning. Now, like I said earlier, I was looking forward to that session of presentations in terms of the outcomes of the group discussions. And as we go out for the break, I just want you to think through three things that have come up in all the four groups, and I'll summarize them into three. The first one is the conflicts between editorial and commercial. I think it's a very big menace in our media space. So think through it. It will form part of our next discussion. The second part is the place of politics in the media sector in Kenya. The place of politics. Some of you have said that some editors keep stories because of their own political interest, and some organizations don't give information because of confidential reasons, political reasons, and some government officials also don't show up for interviews because of political reasons. So therefore, what is the place of politics in the media sector? How independent is the independence of media? Okay. The third thing and the last one is the issue of the language barrier. I think it came across almost all the groups. So let's think through it in this manner. Is the aspect of having multiple, or what's called the vernacular or multilingual radio, TV, or media channels effective in your practice? Is it effective? If you are doing your work in Swahili, at some point you have to bring in English to be able to send a point. So is it effective that you are a Swahili journalist? Is it effective that you are a Luo journalist? I remember when we were with Becky in Mombasa, I think a week or two ago, cost of all the places we had to discuss climate change in English for information. And everybody said, allow me to say this in English. And so is the multi-language or multilingual media effective? Should we go back to pure English and then now say, fine, okay, so those things, When you come back, we'll give you a guide on how you'll be, we'll be drafting some guide for the next session. But I want just to make us think through those 3 areas. Yes, madam? The first one is editorial versus commercial conflict in shaping the climate narrative. Editorial versus commercial. I pay the commercial guys to go and support my work. I set the rules, right? The following day, there's a scandal in my organization. The editorial person comes and takes me so badly. So what is the place? So editorial versus commercial, conflicts in shaping climate narrative. Second one is the place of politics, and of course the last one is multi-language practice in the media profession. Is it effective? So let's think through that. It will form part of our next discussion, okay? Unless there is any announcement, I would break for the tea. Maybe I need to be guided when we are coming back. 30 minutes from now, that is around 10:15. The hour. So, see you shortly.
And